Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with Satori Prime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. So if you haven't signed up to our PEP list, which we basically send you a recap email once a week about this week's shows, make sure you head over to performancepodcasts.com. That's podcasts with an S at the end. And when you do that, you can even pick up 6 hours of subliminal training. That means that using this training, you can go to work on things like speed reading, memory, and even how to be more decisive through subliminal messaging. You just turn it on and you listen to it. So make sure you go ahead and grab that. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to our show and you listen to it via iTunes or Stitcher, we've made it really easy for you to do that. Again, you can go over to performancepodcasts.com/iTunes if you prefer to use iTunes. And if you prefer Stitcher, again, performancepodcasts.com/Stitcher. And remember, we have new episodes coming out every Monday and Thursday morning, so make sure you check those out. Lastly, I just want to let you know of a couple of things. If you want to keep up with everything that we do here at Satori Prime, you can always just head over to our main site. It's satoriprime.com and roam around. We have a ton of free content and we constantly update it. And if you're looking specifically for some mentorship, maybe around your marketing efforts, or specifically on how to use Facebook paid marketing to, let's say, double, triple, or even quadruple your business, then we have a couple of masterminds we run that can absolutely transform your marketing efforts in less than 90 days. So all you have to do if you want to check that out is head over to satoriprime.com/mastermind. All right. So now let's talk about today's show. Well, you know, you got to be doing something right when you're about to host a podcast with the creator of Uggs. That's right. The boot that now half the world is wearing. You're about to hear my interview, or at least part one of my interview with the creator of Uggs, Brian Smith. The interview was incredible. And I say that because Brian not only brings to the table his life experience, which he vocalized so eloquently and raw, really just sharing some of the most painful things that he experienced in business. But more importantly, and things that, you know, I love, is the lessons he took away from the experience and how he's put it together in a brand new book that he's launching. And he's going to share all of that with us here today. So with that, I don't want to steal any more of Brian's thunder. Let's dive right in and introduce you to Brian Smith. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm super honored to have our guest here today. His name is Brian Smith, and he is the creator of these things. So if you're watching this on YouTube, that right there is I'm holding up an Ugg boot, I should say. And Brian Smith is responsible for putting Ugg boots on literally at this point, probably 50% of the entire world.
I wish that were the case.
Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much, Elon. It's great to be here.
So here's what's going to be really cool about today. Brian is just about to release a book. He's going to tell you about it, but all about lessons that he learned from creating Ugg, the company. Yeah. And more importantly, he broke it down into the coolest little thing about treating a business like a child, which you've probably heard us speak about before, and the different stages that every business goes through no matter what. So he's going to share some insights, where he stumbled, what he learned. And I will tell you this, guys. We did this recording yesterday, and the recording failed on us. And it was a brilliant interview. Brilliant. And I actually had to contact Brian back and say, Brian, I'm really sorry, but the recording failed. Would you be willing to do it again? And so he's gracious enough to even come back here and do this with us again. So truly, thank you, Brian.
Hey, my pleasure.
Brian, can I just share a quick story with people before we go into like the lessons and business and all that stuff about how I came across Uggs?
Sure.
Okay. It was about 2000, I believe. I was a sophomore in college, and a buddy of mine was from Los Angeles, and we're sitting in his room in Rochester, and it's freezing, and he's wearing these really funky, and for lack of a better term, what I thought were pretty ugly boots. And I'm like, dude, what are you wearing? And by the way, he was wearing them with shorts, which made it even weirder. So he's like, Elon, just try them. And I was like, I'm not trying your boots. He goes, Elon, try the boots. So he takes the shoe off, and he's barefoot. And I'm like, dude, I'm not putting my foot in your boot that you've been walking around barefoot. He's like, Elon, put your damn foot in the boot. So I put my foot in the boot, and I got one of these looks. If you can see this on video, you'll enjoy this. I was just like, oh. And I go, Alex, I'm sorry. He goes, for what? I go, my foot is having sex with your shoe.
Everybody has an Ugg boot story. That's what
it's really cool. That's why I kind of wanted to open it, because I'm sure other people have their own version. I remember when I first had my wife, I bought her a pair, and my mom, I bought them a pair. Because, I mean, 2000, that was like, 14 years ago. I think the craze here probably started maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that. So all these women started wearing them. I'm like, these were mine first. So thank you. Thank you for the beautiful 14 years of shoe sex.
Excellent. Okay, my friend.
So let's start at the beginning on how this all came to be.
Okay, well, I think the best place to start is way, way, way back, because I was an accountant, like a CPA.
Okay.
And I hated it. And it took me 10 years to graduate, and the day I graduated is the day I quit being an accountant. And I spent a couple of months, wondering what am I going to do. I was just drifting. And one afternoon, I just ripped off the wrapping of a brand new Pink Floyd album called Dark Side of the Moon.
Woohoo!
And started listening. And in the second song, the words were coming through, tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain, that you are young and life is long and there is time to kill today. And I went, oh my God, he's talking to me. And then it went on, but then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And instantly I just got goosebumps, and I went, oh my God. I thought of all my friends who were tracking off to partnerships in the accounting world, and other friends who'd started their business, and they're all 10 years along, and I'm going, oh my God, I missed the gun. And I guess it was like a couple of days later, I just discovered yoga and meditation, and I was meditating one day, and I thought, during that, all the cool things are coming out of California, Levi jeans and waterbeds and all the surf brands. And I thought, I'm going to go to California. I'm going to find the next big thing, and I'm going to bring it back to Australia. And so that's really how I got moving, because everybody asks, how did you discover it? Well, it was about 3 months in California, and I'd been surfing like every day up at Malibu, and still hadn't found the next big thing. And then my buddy Doug was over. We were going to go surfing, and he brought the latest issue of Surfer magazine, and I was flicking through it, and just at one point I just opened up it opened up at a page, and I just got goosebumps again. And it was a photo of these sheepskin boots up in front of a fireplace, and I thought, oh my God, there's no sheepskin boots in America. And at the time, it seemed like 1 in 2 people in Australia owned some sort of sheepskin footwear. So I just looked at Doug and said, hey, buddy, we got to go into business, man. We got to be millionaires.
How every good business idea starts, right? I'm going to be a millionaire.
Yeah, it's so great. And it sort of highlights one of the things that to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a certain amount of ignorance.
Yes.
Or innocence, because had I known all the obstacles that were ahead, there's no way in a million years I would have started that business.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Being ignorant, we just went for it.
Well, we're going to talk about those obstacles. It's funny, you know, I was talking to, I think it was people at brunch the other day, and we were just sharing like war stories, not war stories, but like business war stories. Sure. And I said to them almost the same thing. I said, people always imagine that there's like, you know, you come on the map, right, with UGG, and everyone's like, oh my God, what a great idea. The guy is like an instant success. And they don't know the whatever we're going to talk about, but, you know, years that it took you to become that overnight success. Yeah. But I said, if we wrote down a list of like all the things we went through and said, look, you can earn this much money, but this is what you're going to have to go through. I guarantee that there's almost no amount of money that someone would agree to go through that stuff, knowing that that's what they're going to have to go through ahead of time.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
But when you're going through it, and as we'll see, like I think your mind transforms to accept these lessons, which I'm sure we'll talk about a lot today. So you have this grand idea. What happens next?
Well, Doug went on the road. He was going to be the salesman, and I was going to be the accountant. And he came back after a week with, you know, probably 100 business cards of all the shoe stores that he'd visited and no orders. And everyone's telling him, why are you trying to do sheepskin in California? It doesn't get cold. and despite the fact that California is exactly like Australia, we figured, okay, well, let's go try New York. Maybe it's, you know, the perception's different over there. And we found a little trade show in New York for the footwear industry that was just like weeks away. And I went to that. And in 3 days, nobody even spoke to me because they didn't, you know, they'd look at the little pumps from Taiwan on one side and they'd jump to the espadrilles from Spain on the next side. And I may as well have had car parts or something on the table because they didn't even recognize it. And so on the way back home on the flight to San Diego, I was thinking, you know, how come all of my friends know about UGG? And it dawned on me that they're all surfers. And what happened was all the California surfers who went to Australia had brought 3 or 4 pairs back for their buddies. So it was really well known in the surf market. So Doug and I switched from shoe stores to going down to surf shops. And we did a run, you know, through maybe 40, 50 stores. And every one of them, when we open up the sheepskin boots, they go, oh my God, those are fantastic. You're going to make a killing, you know? And after like 3 or 4 days of this, Doug and I realized, shit, we're onto something really big here. And so we raised 20 grand and bought 500 pairs of boots in. And then we went back on the road now with all the product in our vans and the order books and back to exactly the same surf shops. And it was like, Brian, I think you're going to do really well with those, but we couldn't sell them out of our store. You know, we just sell surfboards and shorts and thongs, and shop after shop after shop was saying the identical thing. And Doug was getting the same up in the San Fernando Valley. And we regrouped after a week. This was like late November. And
what year was this?
This was back in 79 of all years, you know.
Okay.
And late November, and we got together and put, you know, wrote out our orders, and we had sold 28 pairs.
Wow. Total.
Exactly $1,000 by a fluke, and that was our first year's sales. But the point is, Elon, that there's no business out there on the New York Stock Exchange worth billions of dollars that didn't start with $1,000.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Well, but at the same time, it's kind of demoralizing, right? So you've kind of gone this path. You think this is going to be a massive success. You invest. So now you owe people $20,000, right? Yeah.
Well, that was when I should have given up. But you know, I've got 470 pairs of boots in my 3rd bedroom, and an investor who owns it all. You know, so I couldn't give up. So we started out going to swap meets and then when I'd go surfing up at Malibu, I had a whole range of product in the back of the van, and I would open up the doors and be open for business. And you know how you mentioned earlier what you felt when you put that boot on?
Yeah.
Well, the word of mouth was so powerful that I was doing tons of business out of the back of the van. And for the first year after that, it was $30,000. And then I started running ads in the Surfer Magazine and Action Sports, and sales $30,000. and I get these models and pose them on the beach with perfect hair and perfect boots and sales $30,000. And I couldn't figure out what was going on because I felt like a failure because I couldn't even get an appointment with the mall stores, the big shoe departments. And I was back in Chicago at Montgomery Ward, and the buyer, I just made the best pitch ever. And the buyer looks at me and goes, "Brian, why are you here?" And I went, "Because I'm trying to get an order for the California mall store." And he goes, "Brian, don't you get it? We're the elephants. We never move until the mice are running around under our feet." And I just instantly got what he meant, which until the specialty stores were just crazy, they weren't going to look at it.
Wow.
And so I got back and I was having a beer with one of my buddies who owned a surf shop down in South San Diego, and was telling him the problem. And he just called to the back of the room, all these little grommets that hung out there. And he says, "Hey, you guys, what do you think of UGG?" And they all came out going, "Oh, those UGG boots, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those models? They can't surf." And instantly I got it again. It's like I'm sending the wrong message to my target market. And so within a couple of days, I'd figured out a way around that. I started sponsoring a couple of young surf guys that had just turned pro, and started following them when they went surfing. I'd just follow them on the trails to, Black's Beach or San Onofre, and I'd take photographs. And I started running these ads in the Surfer magazine, and the sales jumped to $400,000 purely because I hit the right image. And I figured out that, good advertising is wanting the reader he wants to be in the photograph. When I figured that out, that changed the whole direction of UGG.
So you went from $30,000 to $400,000 basically by changing an ad.
Yep. And that was just the catalyst. But what I've come to learn out of all of that and all the rest of the years I've been in business is there's a theme with businesses. You can't give birth to adults. This is basically the theme of my book, which is I lay out the whole 17 years I ran the UGG business and likened it to raising a child to 17 years old,
Yeah.
And every business starts with conception. Somebody has to think the idea or the opportunity and then take action, and that's the birth. For me, the birth was buying those first 6 pairs of samples. And then, like every infant, it just goes through this interminable period of infancy where it just lies there and you have to feed it, change diapers, feed it, change diapers. And, you might get a smile or a giggle now and again, but it's just this period that there's no amount of overfeeding or shaking the cradle or urging it. That infant cannot get up and go to college. It has to be an infant.
Yeah.
Then eventually it'll start toddling, and that's a pretty cool stage because, the first customers are looking at it, and the early, the early adopters are thinking, hey, this is a cool deal, and that's a great period. And then you'll hit the youth, which is consistent orders, consistent production, billings doing great, sales force is great. That's a beautiful period for every business. But if it's a really, really good product like UGG was, it'll hit the teenage phase, and that's when all bets are off. It wants to be everywhere at once. It wants to be at every party, and everyone wants a piece of it. And that's a really dangerous phase. I almost lost the company 3 times during that teenage phase. But then, the accountants come in and put in the controls for spending and purchasing and all that sort of stuff, and it becomes a mature adult. And so that's what I learned from, that 30,000. Sometimes you just, my great saying in the book is the quickest way for a tadpole to become a frog is live every day happily as a tadpole. Because if you're just doing everything that you should do in a business to build it and keep it alive, as long as you got hope and passion for the business, you're going to do a tweak, or the market will change, or something's going to happen, and bam, you're out of the infancy and you're off to the toddling stage.
Yeah. I think it's so smart. I mean, even as I was looking through the book, it caught my attention that you broke everything down into this analogy of a child, because I always tell people the same thing. Like, most people treat their business like a hobby, like something that they're going to try, right? the ones that succeed treat their business like their baby. And what I mean by that is, if your child gets sick and you call the doctor's office and the doctor says, hey, he's not in for another 2 weeks, he's on vacation, you will move mountains to make sure your child sees a doctor and gets the care that he needs. However, in business, like we've trained people in Facebook marketing, and say we tell them like there's this tool that we use, and they'll be like, well, it's too expensive, or they're coming out with an update in 30 days, so I'm just going to wait. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Right? It's like the same thing. This is what your business needs today, not 30 days from now. Like, take care of it. And I think when you start looking at it like that, it gives you a sense of responsibility and a sense of almost like you said, unconditional love, right? That's what I think about in infancy. What are they, other than like sitting there like a wad of skin, like there's no interaction, there's nothing, and you're just pouring everything into this.
Yeah, too many people get paralyzed by the fear of they don't know what's coming. And all you got to do is start, because the universe just falls in line once you start. But if you, like so many people go, I've got this great idea. And I say, well, have you done anything? Like, oh, I don't know how to get a business license, Yep. And I go, give me a break. I've never had a business license. Just do it. Get started. Once you start, everything falls in place.
Yeah. I want to go back a single second, because we kind of went over this great story, and I want to point out two things. When you were at that surfer shop with the guys that came out and were like, oh, Uggs are so fake, blah, blah, blah. Did you see the ads, right? That epiphany moment for you. There's just two things that occurred to me. One was, from a marketing perspective, and this is something we teach people in our Facebook masterminds, we always talk about image is very, very important in marketing. Like the actual images you use in your ads will probably carry about 80% of the effectiveness of the ad.
Yeah.
And you said something else that was really smart, which is like, you knew your target market. You knew who you were going after. So a lot of people always talk about, well, I need to find my avatar. I need to find my avatar, right? Like who I'm going to promote to. I tell them that's great. But as you just alluded, that's only maybe 50% of the way there.
Yes.
The other thing is, what actually has that avatar take action? What has them take their wallet out of their pocket and buy your product, your service, your offer? And that's what you were missing. You knew who you were going for, but you figured out in that moment how to actually then communicate with that person, which is really important.
Yeah, like the ads that I were running earlier, nobody wanted to be part of that. But when I started running ads that they wanted to be in the middle of, it was, hey, Mom, everyone at school, all the cool kids have got Ugg boots, we want Uggs, and that drew the wallets out for the
There
mom.
you go. There you go.
And the moms started walking the malls, and that was the mice.
There it is.
To go to surf shops, so they started hitting all the malls, and that's really where the beginning of the real business started.
That's awesome. The other thing I want to just point out to people when you're starting a business, I think the life lessons occur, more and more and more, but I think you always have to take your ego out of the equation a lot of the times. And what occurred to me is like, they came out and they pretty much badmouthed your shoe, your company, your marketing, right? Like right to your face. They probably didn't know it was you, right? But your ego could have been like, well, F them and what do they know and blah, 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 because we want to be so justified and right about what we put out there. And I feel like it's amazing, you had ears to listen from almost a subjective view and just be like, look, this is great input. This is stuff that I can build off of. And I think if you had the ego there, you wouldn't have even heard the opportunity.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Awesome. So I just wanted to point to that. And then you just said, let's fast forward now. You just said something about the unknown.
Yeah.
And about how people are so afraid of the unknown. I think that's true in life, not just in business. Anytime that people are faced with that, they're just terrified and paralyzed. Is there some Well, let's transition this into some examples, right? Like, so you go through this business. Are there some crazy stories that really allude to what you went through, whether it's, facing the unknown or dealing with massive obstacles? Because I know your book is really geared towards that.
Okay, I'll tell you one that had a really good lesson to it. We were doing like a couple of $1 million in sales. This is about 7 or 8 years through the business, and I had to keep buying out the smaller investors to get bigger investors because we were like doubling all the time, and there was an instance where I bought out one investor and brought 3 new guys in, and we were all going to own 25% of the business. They were bringing in the money, and I was bringing in the business. And there were 2 things. One, I became the sales rep for Southern California. And 2, I didn't get my stock, my 25%, until I finished with this trademark lawsuit that I'd been fighting with another company, UGHS. And that was fine for me because I knew we were going to do that. But like the weekend, we moved all the warehouse up to their place in Anaheim, and I left their office and went down Beach Boulevard towards Huntington Beach on my first sales call for the week. And I walked in and the guy goes, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the business."
Huh?
And I went, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I just called an order and they said you don't own the business anymore." And I went, "What?" And I couldn't wait to finish. And I went outside to the Shell gas station. This is before cell phones, and I called up the office and said, "Neil, what are you telling people?" And he says, "Well, that's the truth. You don't own the business." And I'm going, "Yes, I do. You're my 3 new partners." He says, "No, you don't get your stock." And I just like lost it. I mean, my world fell apart that minute, and I went straight back home to San Diego, and I pulled out the contract and I read it, and I went, "Oh my God, technically they're right." And I spent about 3 days, just in this huge depression, and I was checking with my wife, should I get another job? Should I become a real estate agent or a business broker, or, and after a couple of days, I did another meditation, and I just figured out, I got these goosebumps that, sales is what I really wanted to do. And I thought, okay, well, what can I sell, and the goosebumps showed me that UGG was the best product that I knew of to get out and sell because I loved it. I'm passionate about it. I want to put a pair of boots on everyone on the planet, And so I decided that, okay, well, I'm just going to be the sales rep, even though all my dreams of owning this, multinational corporation and being the CEO one day, that all crashed. But I just decided, okay, I'm going to do the best job I can on the road to sell product. And so I went back and started visiting with all the retailers, and Neil agreed not to tell people that I sold the business,
Nice of him.
Yeah. And so we, had a great time on the road because these people were all my friends now, and I got back to the office after the first month and Neil handed me a check and it was like $5,000. And I had never pulled a cent out of the business before this. And, went back on the road, came back the next month, and there's a check for 10 grand, and the next month another check for 10,000. And I just realized, man, I haven't done any invoicing, any shipping, any purchasing, any office administration. I hadn't done a thing except be out on the road having a really good time with all my buddies and making all this money. And the lesson that I learned from that was sometimes, or not sometimes, mostly, your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. And I put that in the book, and I'll say it again because it's pretty important.
Yes.
Mostly your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings. And I thought back to when I lost control and became a non-owner and how devastating that was. And now here I am, and this went on for 3 years. I was just a sales rep, and I was earning $80,000 to $100,000 a year for having a good time and playing golf all summer, So it just highlights that if you're in a business and your partner takes off and takes half your clients, or you've got a major customer that bails on you and goes with somebody else, and you've got all the inventory left. These things will make you stop and change direction. And I can't think of a disaster that's happened to me, ever, when I didn't look back over a year or so and go, thank God that was the best thing that ever happened, because now look where I am. I would never have changed direction if that hadn't have happened.
I couldn't agree more. And you're just reminding me, like, when I'm only doing what I'm doing today with Satori Prime because of a very similar situation where I owned a very successful commercial real estate finance firm. And, the economy kind of did what it did. We actually survived. And then slowly but surely, the banks that were giving us money, they went into trouble. And, we saw this like sinking ship. And well, another side lesson is I ended up pouring all my life savings at the time to try to recover the bank, which was a massive mistake. I think just as a side note, like, get out when you see the ship start sinking, because you can take, like, I could have taken that money and started another business and been way farther down the road. But ultimately,
I've done the same thing several times, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, like, I had golden handcuffs and I was really good at what I was doing. And there is no way that on my own accord, I would have left ever. And I just think, like, life sends us these, what appear to us at the moment as probably like cataclysmic, like the world is ending events.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that we will actually change and veer paths.
Yep.
But it always kind of, like you said, when you look back at it, you're like, that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, because now my life is here. And you can almost see like where your life would have been if it hadn't happened.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
Yeah. So I love that. Can you just say that line again? Because I think you just said it so brilliantly. Your life's most disappointing disappointments. Is that what it is?
Yeah, okay. Mostly your most disappointing disappointments become your greatest blessings.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And for those that are listening, like, you might be dealing with something like that right now. And hopefully that'll give you some freedom. But if you want to see how true this actually is, look at anything in your life over like a 5-10 year period. And I bet you at that time when it was happening, it seemed like the worst thing that ever happened. And now where you are, you'll look at all of those things as the best thing that ever happened in most cases. So I really, really like that. All right, let's talk a little bit about, because I'm kind of intrigued. Well, I'm very intrigued, I should say, with the childlike process that you've built, right? So what I'm hearing is, and this is from my experience, and maybe you can shed some light on this, I feel like most people don't even give their businesses a chance. Like, they'll quit way, way too soon. That sounds to me like the infancy stage when people do that. Is that accurate?
I'd say 90% of people give up because they don't see the forward progress in the infancy.
Great point. So infancy, basically, to put things in perspective, is the time where you're just doing the work. Very little to no results are being shown in reality. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Great line, by the way. One of my first mentors said, the only difference between successful and not successful people is successful people can stand in no result longer than anyone else.
That's great. I've never heard that. That's
right. That's exact. I think that's what it takes to get through that phase. And I like that you had a lot of opportunities to get out. What do you think kept you going? Because like, if 90% of people are quitting and the few of us are actually going through, what had you stay the course?
I think the best answer to that is something I carry in my daily planner here. Let me just grab it out.
Uh-oh, we're getting private.
This has been transferred from my planner to planner every year for nearly 20 years. And it's 4 little points. One is that I'll just read them all out. The first is feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, enthuse over apparent defeat, and invigorate in the presence of difficulties. Now, I read those points, in a philosophical book, 25 years ago, and every time I get in a really bad situation, I pull that out, and it's feast upon uncertainty. Well, you can imagine how much uncertainty there was, in my business over and over again, and the disappointments we've already talked about. And enthusing it over apparent defeat. Defeat is not real until the day you give up, because otherwise it's just obstacles. And I have this theory: there's no just like straight climb to success. You come along, you hit a barrier, which I call a plateau, right?
Yep.
And you figure out what to do, and you get over it, right? And you cruise along again until you hit the next plateau. You get up and over it. And that's what business is. That's what life is.
Yep.
There's no easy cruise, even if you got millions and millions of dollars in the bank, you're still going to hit these issues, and you have to just get over them one at a time. So those 4 points: feast upon uncertainty, fatten upon disappointment, enthuse over apparent defeat, and invigorate in the presence of difficulties. They take you out of victim stage, and like, oh, poor me, this happened, why did it happen to me? And it puts you in charge. Every one of those 4 things is an action item. And the minute you start thinking in those terms, your whole life changes back to, I can do it.
I absolutely love those quotes. And I will actually get those quotes for you from Brian. So just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast, and you'll see the quotes there and all the resource guide, as well as the action guides for this individual episode. So we're going to stop part 1 right there. And I highly urge you to check out part 2, because in part 2, Brian shares with me, honestly, one of the most raw, crazy stories that he ever experienced in his life. And this is the part that he told me, most of my book is really positive, but this is the one story that you may want to keep razor blades away from you at the time. So it's really a fascinating story where UGG basically almost ceased to exist. So make sure you come back and check out part 2. Until we meet again, have an amazing, amazing day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.
Did you run through doors till you hit the floor? Did you read my